yesterday, we didn't sprint, but we did a lot of skipping. Let's talk about skipping. And yes, I'm talking about skip, this thing. I'm not going to sing the rest of that. Skipping is such a natural movement for people, most people, and it feels so damn good. And it's actually a bit more taxing than people believe. And I came out of that workout skipping yesterday, feeling like my hips were nice and open, tons of extension, my posture's up. I feel like I grew an inch. I was strong in the gym this morning. I just feel incredible. What is it about skipping, and why do you have sprinters skip so much?
We skipped a lot because the reality is you could not sprint. And that is the reality for almost everybody, because we stop sprinting when we're whatever age. Some people stop sprinting at 15, sometimes some people it's 20. But very few people are actually sprinting through their 20s. And next to nobody is sprinting through their 30s. So we know that the movement of sprinting or running fast, and we kind of know what this does and why this is good for you, right? We know that, yeah, moving our body intensively with intensity is probably something we should be able to do for as long as we possibly can. But we can't. Because typically, we've still got pretty good engines into our 30s and 40s and 50s, but we don't have the bodies to be able to handle the stresses and the forces that this engine could put into the body. So our tissue and our joints just is not able to handle all of these forces. If you were to go out and sprint yesterday, even if we did, we ended up warming up for how long? An hour and a half warm-up. If we did let's say a real proper warm-up, we warmed up for 30 minutes, and then I just said, Andrew, I want you to sprint as fast as you possibly can for 50 meters, that's not going to end well. For most people, maybe you could get through it yesterday, but for most people, that wouldn't end well.
You end up with a pull or a strain or a couple days of just feeling not well.
Because we just don't do that, and we don't have the tissue capacity to be able to handle that anymore, or the joint capacity. There's so many people assume they have to run really quickly somewhere, and they just didn't know that they had to do it, or they're playing backyard basketball or football, and they tweak a hamstring or tweak a calf or something even worse, right? It happens all the time. We just do not have the tissue capacity anymore to handle those forces. So what do we do instead? And I typically recommend two activities. One is running up hills. There's a lot less stress on the tissue and the joint system by sprinting up a hill than there is on sprinting on a straightaway. But second, I think more important, is actually skipping. And I'm with you. I don't know why we stopped skipping.
I think it's associated with only childlike behavior, but that's like saying jump rope is only associated with childlike behavior. And I'm a big believer in skipping rope. We'll talk about skipping rope, but I think that's it. Maybe this conversation or this portion of the conversation could be titled, let's normalize skipping for adults.
Absolutely.
It felt awesome.
Yeah.
You can cover a lot of ground quickly. Yeah. Heart rate gets up, but not to an outrageous degree. You're not sucking for air. Mm-hmm. But it does feel a little silly if you're not on a track. But you've mentioned, what's the longest distance you've ever skipped?
10 miles.
Did you get some funny looks?
I got a few.
Nice. And you're a real tall guy. You're 6'3", so you can't really hide very easily.
That was in the park, so there wasn't a lot of people.
Okay.
But I skipped for 20 minutes every morning on the roads. I get a few honks. But that's okay.
I mean, they could be honks of approval.
It could well be.
Yeah, or something else.
But you think about it, like you're actually taxing the coordination patterns and the tissue in the joints in pretty similar ways as if we were going to sprint. We're working on pushing the knee behind the hip, getting into this knee behind butt pattern, this hip extension pattern, which is so important. And I know this is a topic of conversation that you had with Kelly when Kelly was on here, the importance of getting your knee behind your butt and finding and searching for opportunities to do that more often, because we lose that so easily. So skipping allows us to do that. Secondary to that is the coordination aspect between how we coordinate the flexion extension at the ankle, the flexion extension at the knee, and the flexion extension at the hip. And we do that in a very similar way as sprinting, where each of them stiffen at this time that is considered throughout the entirety of the system, where it's just like the spring. The leg acts as a spring, where if you think about when we jog or when we run, we're kind of running on our ankles and knees a little bit. We don't feel like we're really using our hips when you're running a 10-minute mile. It's a lot of stress through the foot. It's a lot of stress through the calves. And by the way, I'm not anti-running or anti-jogging. I jog and I run and I still do all that stuff. I'm not saying now stop doing all that and just go and skip. I'm just saying find some opportunities to also skip, because skipping actually can tax the system in very similar ways as pretty high intensity sprinting.
I want to hover a little bit on knee behind butt. So knee behind.
Shout out Kelly Starrett.
Shout out Kelly Starrett. I mean, if you think about this, folks, like knee behind butt means into extension. So the hips are opening, so to speak. I know in yoga they say hip opening means a different thing, but hip extension generally means posture is more elevated, chin away from chest generally. I mean, you could get knee behind butt with your chin down, but it's tougher. It's just the sternum comes up, kind of naturally puts us into external rotation. So think thumbs out to the side like the fawns as opposed to inward. And then when you think about the typical sitting, standing, walking, jogging pattern of everybody, especially if you're a commuter, doesn't matter if you're on a subway, bus, car, or otherwise, or plane, you're folded in. And so what I'm starting to realize is that knee behind butt, ankle elevated, sternum up. I mean, these are the hallmarks of locomotion. And so it's interesting that jogging in particular, seems to follow this kind of like forward folded, kind of like almost like falling forward kind of thing. I'm not trying to beat up on jogging because I also like to jog, but I wonder if minute for minute, skipping would be a much better activity than jogging for people who want to elevate their heart rate, you know, all the standard general adaptations that occur with exercise, improved insulin regulation, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think for the person who has not skipped in a while to go out and skip for a couple minutes is the way to do it? Or should they skip for a lap and then walk a lap? What would be the way to break into this?
Yeah, I think probably the worst thing to do is go out for a 10-mile skip. Don't do that. I think we start off with like a 30-second skip, 30-second jog, 30-second skip, 30-second jog, or 30-second skip followed by a 30-second walk. And the difference is, you'll feel this, right? If you think about when you skip, and we talked about this a lot yesterday, I was asking you to be expressive, express yourself. Think about what your posture is and how you're holding yourself. You don't seem to think about those things when you jog. You just jog, and as you said, you're kind of closed and small and short, and you're just trying to get through it, right? The heart rate gets up to whatever it is, and yeah, you get some good exercise. But skipping, here's your opportunity to truly express yourself, be big and free and open and bouncy and rhythmical. All of these things that were at one point in our lives pretty important to us, and we lose. And that is what we get from sprinting, right? The best sprinters are the ones who can express themselves truly, maximally, like totally let go. And it doesn't have to be like massively powerful. Like the skips that we were doing yesterday were what we call low amplitude skips, where we're just sort of skipping back and forth, but you're still asking you to be tall and expressive and swing and be stiff on the ground. And I feel like there's, as I said, there's so many different benefits to this, whether it's just been the plyometric benefit, whether it's the fascial benefit, whether it because this is such a cross-body coordinative aspect, there's all sorts of brain benefits to that, as you know. It's, there's so much more benefits to skipping than there is to just jogging. So the on-ramp for me when I talk to people about the benefits of skipping is just to put it in their jogs. So when I was talking to one of your photographers yesterday, and he said, how do I do this? I usually jog, and I'm going like 10-minute mile pace. I said, well, next time you jog, just go for your jogs, go for about a mile or so when you're doing a typical jog, and then just go back and forth between skipping and jogging every 30 seconds or so. And I guarantee you that you will feel better with every skip that you do, every single one, because there's this self-organizing, coordinative aspect to it, where you start feeling a little bit more bouncy, a little lighter, a little bit more coordinated, a little bit more rhythmic, which feeds your jogging. So for me, that's probably the best on-ramp, is just to work it into your current jogs. And then from there, start getting a little bit more powerful with it, a little bit more expressive with it. Now we start driving the thigh up and back and getting a little bit more hip extension. Start being, now we can start talking about skips for distance, where you're trying to say, okay, from here to that tree that's 50 meters away, how many steps do I need to take to get to that 50-meter away tree? So doing things like that.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by activities, both physical and mental, that facilitate the transition into a more difficult activity, physical or mental. I started to think about this when I started working on my book in earnest. It's very hard to just jump into writing. But I noticed that if I did some drawing, listened to a lecture while I was drawing, and I do anatomical drawings, very easy to transition into writing. I enjoy drawing. I'm not trying to accomplish much with it, but it's a very natural activity for me, and just very easy to drop into a deep groove for writing for hours.
Really?
And then I started talking to a musician friend of mine he's a songwriter, very accomplished songwriter, and he does the same. And then I saw a post from Joni Mitchell that she would paint before she would sing. And I think these transition activities that are natural for us, that don't feel as constricted by distance over time, or, sometimes I put my drawings on social media, but they're really for me. They're a way of kind of thinking about the biology from a circuit standpoint. It is very personal and kind of abstract. As you talk about skipping, it seems a little bit the same, where, skipping, we're not necessarily trying to become the fastest skipper in the world or beat our yesterday's skipping time. We're just trying to skip with more, as you said, more expression, more enjoyment. Yeah. But perhaps it sounds like, indeed, it can help transition into a faster gait with what we're doing for jogging or for running, or transition us right into sprinting. And I think that these transition points for physical and mental activities are very important, because these days there's so many tools and protocols, dare I say, and people start to feel like, oh, I have to do all of these things. How would I do this, right? How am I supposed to meditate and get sunlight and do it? I already exercising a ton. Now you want me to skip? The way you describe it is completely different. It's saying, no, you're still doing your cardio, quote unquote, but maybe you do your zone 2 cardio and you incorporate some skipping, which will make your zone 2 faster for you, or your high intensity interval training more. You'll feel more pliable, more explosive. I think
that's part of it. I think that step 1 is incorporating in, so you can actually be comfortable skipping. And step 2 is, now can we add a little bit more speed, force, velocity to that skip, where it becomes in and of itself a workout, where you're skipping as hard as you can for 50 meters and walking back and doing that 10 to 15 times.
Would you consider that a solid workout for
100%.
skipping?
That would be a great skipping workout.
Skipping 50 meters, walking back.
Yeah. Doing that 10 to 15 times. Yeah. Because that is safe. If you warm up, I'm not saying go out and do a maximal effort skip for 50 meters without doing a warm-up. Do a good warm-up first that includes some low amplitude skips and maybe some jogs and some stretches. Do that for 10 or 15 minutes, and then do some maximal amplitude skips for over 50 meters. That's a great workout in and of itself. Like a lot of really beneficial plyometric work being done there.